Welcome to the RD2BE podcast. Each week we sit down with a different registered dietitian nutritionist to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the dietetics profession. Our aim is to dismantle the notion that there is a traditional career path. I'm Carl Barnes, the registered dietitian behind the scenes of RD2BE.
And I am Jenna Warnock, the RD2BE host. Our RD guests share their stories, career paths, and advice to help students like us succeed in the profession. Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. I'm your host, Jenna, and we're super excited to sit down with Dr. Cheryl Bacon again. And we mentioned and talked about her dietetic internship at the previous episode that we had with her. But this week, we're definitely going to take a bit of a turn with discussions, and we're really just going to talk about ACEND and these new doctoral standards within dietetics. And Dr. Cheryl Bacon has had a lot of great experience in those ideas and her dissertation because she just recently finished her PhD. And so she's going to be sharing a lot of experience on her dissertation, her experience with the doctoral program, just ACEND in general, how that relates to RD2Bs, because it's super important, because this stuff will definitely be at the forefront for us as aspiring dietitians. And so without further ado, Dr. Cheryl Bacon, the Director of Clinical Nutrition and the DI Director at UChicago Medicine Ingalls Memorial in Harvey, Illinois. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, we've definitely been in communications with it and super excited to finally get down and just kind of talk about ACEND, talk about the doctoral standards, all things like that. And so first, I just wanted to ask, what influenced you to go back to school and pursue a doctorate specifically within the dietetics profession?
Yeah, I think my journey, like everybody's journey, is unique. I feel like mine is maybe a little more atypical, but at the time I was a clinician at Rush University in Chicago, and they developed a new, part-time online PhD in health sciences that was free to employees. And so really it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. Was always thinking about when's a good time. I was pregnant with my first child at the time, but figured just give it a go. It's free. We'll see. And I really enjoyed what I was learning. I was taking leadership courses. The whole program was focused on leadership, research, and education, which I felt would really support me in what I was doing as a clinician, but also as a preceptor and a clinical coordinator at the time for the internship. And so I did that for about 2 years, and then I took a new job as the dietetic internship director at Ingalls, where I'm currently at. So at that time, I took a leave of absence from the PhD for a couple of reasons. One, my family was growing, and then also it was no longer free. So I said, okay, that was nice. But then about 2 years later, ACEND came out with a new set of draft standards. Given the increased graduate degree requirement to be eligible to sit for the exam, in the draft standards, they proposed that every program director would need a doctorate. So this was just out for public comment at the time, but it really came at an intersection when the university was asking if I was going to resume courses or they were going to discontinue me as a student. And so I decided to just give it a go again. For years I was saying there's no way I can work full time, be a mother, and do my PhD. It would just be too hard. Instead, I decided to, honestly, my plan was to take a couple courses and say, whoo, that was too hard. Yeah, so I couldn't do it. But the ball got rolling, and I was enjoying what I was learning. I was able to organize everything. I got support from my employer as well as an Academy Foundation scholarship. So things were certainly moving forward. And then ACEND said, you don't need to have your doctorate at this time. So that requirement was removed, but everything else was pretty much in motion at that time. So I kind of have an external motivator for sure, but I don't think anybody can finish a doctorate without being internally motivated for that. So there were definitely two different factors. And I knew that it would give me more opportunities in the future. But first and foremost, I felt like what I was learning, I was able to apply directly into my work. And that was really rewarding.
Yeah, no, and it definitely sounds like just taking advantage of the opportunity whenever it's presented to yourself. And I mean, I can for sure just hearing, balancing being a mother, having, being a dietetic internship director and all of these positions with a PhD on top of it, that can sound really, daunting and really overwhelming. But I'm sure because there's a lot of second career dietitians out there as well, where it's like, oh, I can't balance like everything all at once. But it's like, again, if you have that intrinsic and even, that extrinsic motivator too, depending on the circumstances, really take advantage of every opportunity you can get. And that's a really great example. And you finally saw it into fruition very recently with your doctorate and things like that. And so in terms of your dissertation topic in particular and what you did throughout your doctoral program, can you tell us a little bit about the topic, kind of how it got started, where it came from, what it was, all that good stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it stemmed from kind of the explanation I just provided here a little bit as well. Should I get my doctorate? Is it going to be required? Honestly, I had conversations with some of my mentors about what type of doctorate I should pursue. I was a clinician for over 10 years. I felt really confident in that space. So I was interested in pursuing my doctorate in clinical nutrition, which is a practice doctorate, because I felt that it would that I would be more successful in that. Honestly, a PhD intimidated me, as I think for most who are just starting it, wondering if you're capable of finishing it. There's a huge attrition rate. Not a lot of people finish a PhD after they start it. And so it really was, my topic ended up being kind of answering my own question. So my dissertation was a mixed methods study in which I interviewed individuals who were currently enrolled in a doctorate in clinical nutrition program, which is a practice doctorate program. And I wanted to learn what factors influenced their decision to pursue that practice doctorate. So in a way, it helped to answer my own question, but I really felt like it was going to help inform other dietitians like me who were wanting to pursue and advance their education, but really weren't sure what path that they should take. And then ultimately, I had an opportunity to continue to serve with and volunteer for ACEND, and was asked to serve on their doctoral standards. And so I really felt like the research that I was doing was having an impact. I was able to apply it. I was able to take what I was learning and help inform some of the decisions of that committee. And that was really rewarding too.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And whenever it came to being on the ASCEND committee, so you were approached to be on the committee, like kind of how did that
Yeah.
look like whenever it came to you being on the ASCEND committee with the new doctoral standards and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had served on the ACEND board for the prior 7 years, and as I was transitioning off, there was conversations about starting this expanded standards committee for the doctoral standards. At the same time, I was looking forward to having some free time back to finish that PhD because I was still working. I was volunteering for the ACEND board, but I had actually I knew that they were going to go ahead and recruit individuals who work in that space, right? Current program directors for these practice doctorate students, graduates of the program. And they wanted 2 ACEND board members to be on that committee as well, because as ACEND board members, they know the standards very well and can make sure that kind of can stay on track to make sure that it mirrors the current standards that we have for other program types. And I asked if I could be a part of that because I really felt like it would enrich my own research, as well as I didn't realize this till later, but then I have an opportunity to contribute to the standards as well based on what I was learning in my research.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's really great. And then as far as your research, the findings and things that you kind of discovered with those participants who are in a DCN or doctorate in clinical nutrition program, what were like the major takeaways from that research? And the most important thing is how does that translate for aspiring RDs or just things that RD2Bs should know given your research?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit more background on that before jumping to the findings, but I went ahead and I reached out to 3 programs that currently have doctorate in clinical nutrition programs. I worked with those program directors and asked if they can assist me in recruiting for my study. So I did a quantitative survey. I sent out a survey to all those students currently enrolled, and I gathered, your basic demographic and professional characteristics. But then the meat of my research was really getting down to what factors influence your decision to pursue a doctorate in clinical nutrition. So in the end, I had 99 individuals respond to the survey. And they, on average, their age was about 43 years old, plus or minus about 10 years with that. 60% worked in clinical nutrition, while about 25% worked in education, and the remaining worked in other areas like private practice, research, industry, and the like. there was really a wide range of how long they were practicing as a clinician before they went ahead and decided to pursue their doctorate. So I think the average years, they were working for about 13 years before they went back for their doctorate, plus or minus about 9 years. But really the range was a year and a half to 33 years, somebody going back after that point. And as far as the demographic makeup, it pretty much mirrors what our profession is, predominantly female, white, married. And so these were the individuals who were responding to my survey. I think it's interesting to note that the DCN programs that I was recruiting from, they are online for the most part. The majority of the time is online and asynchronous and part-time. And I think that was really important, relate to some of my findings, is that those participants said a primary reason for pursuing that practice doctorate is because it allowed the flexibility for them to continue to work. I'd have to go back and look for exact, but I would say majority, close to 100%, were working while also getting their practice doctorate. And so I asked those quantitative questions, but then I also followed up with 10 people and did a semi-structured interview to ask them to describe more why their motivation for pursuing a doctorate, as well as describe their decision for pursuing a doctorate, to get to see if there was anything else that they might share with us that I didn't have in my survey based on my literature review. So that quantitative data, what really came up first, it was all personal growth. The top 3 reasons for wanting to pursue their practice doctorate was to achieve a personal goal, to advance their scope of practice and what they were doing, and for an intellectual challenge. The least likely influencers were external factors such as their employers. There were a few cases, but in some, like, they didn't feel pressure from their employer to get it. They didn't feel pressure from family or friends, which could be different than other doctorates. And tuition reimbursement wasn't a big influencer for as well. So I think that tells us that many of these individuals were at either a point in their life, or they had the means to go ahead and pursue this advanced education without relying on support of finances from external sources.
Yeah, and I think those findings are really great and interesting, and mainly kudos to you for being able to get, because I feel like especially a doctoral standards is within dietetics. Dietetics is already small. Doctoral programs and doctoral students are already a very small niche, but being able to get almost 100 participants and getting all of this data, very, very impressive, and also really great information to be able to reflect on that ACEND committee and for the future doctoral standards. And whenever it comes to your research, being on the ACEND committee, and us mainly talking about the doctorate in clinical nutrition, whenever it came to the new doctoral standards that you and the committee were kind of cultivating and making those guidelines for, where would that fall in comparison to the already established doctorate in clinical nutrition? And how does that look? Because I feel like there's a lot of aspiring RDs where, right now we're just like, listen, I'm just trying to get that master's degree. I'm just trying to get to work and things like that. And with what you said, with the DCN program, a lot of people, they were already working. They were in a position where they had the means to pursue it, and it was very intrinsically motivated. And just to kind of eliminate any worries, it's not like they had an external pressure to get the DCN. They did it because they wanted to, and because it would be intellectually stimulating, and that it would positively contribute internally to their goals and things like that. But so whenever it came to those doctoral standards with the ACEND committee and making those guidelines, where would the DCN in comparison to those new standards fall?
Yeah, I'm going to back up and finish answering my previous question, which I think will
Yes.
help to answer the first one. But in my interview portion, I identified 5 major themes of why these 10 individuals that I interviewed were pursuing their doctorate in clinical nutrition. One of the main themes really was around CDR, the Commission on Dietetic Registration's increased eligibility requirements. And within those, there were sub-themes. So for example, it was, for some, they felt like it was a requirement to get their master's. So if they wanted to teach or have advanced growth, they should go ahead and go one level forward. There were some comments as far as individuals who have been practicing for a long time didn't want to feel like a lesser candidate to these new graduates coming out with a master's degree. They wanted to be able to distinguish themselves a little bit. And then also for that teaching component, a lot of them knew that they might want to contribute, go back and teach, not necessarily full-time, but what they were interested in, what they were passionate about. They wanted to be an instructor, a lecturer. They wanted to give back to the profession. And so a lot of them knew that they would need a doctorate to be able to do that as well. Another theme that came out was increasing credibility and being seen as equal to other allied health professions that we're working alongside, especially in the clinical setting. Most of those have a practice doctorate as well, although not all professions require it. Physical therapy, audiology, and pharmacy require a practice doctorate. But occupational therapy, they don't require it, but many of them do. Even speech language pathology has a practice doctorate. And so it was really to stay on par with those other professions. But then it came down to, those other intrinsic things: personal growth, career opportunity and expansion, as well as a commitment to learning. And so to answer that question and then segue into your second question, which was, how does the doctoral standards that ACEND prepared compared to the current doctorate in clinical nutrition program? And I think it's important to kind of understand who was the makeup of this expanded standards committee. The doctoral standards and the development of them really came at the request of the program directors of these current doctorate in clinical nutrition programs. Accreditation carries a lot of respect in the academic community, and they wanted to standardize the requirement to earn the DCN degree. It's a degree, not a credential, and that's a distinction I'll be making throughout as well. And there's other universities who were starting to develop programs and also use the degree designator as a DCN. But it was a very different graduate that they were releasing into the field, as opposed to these three kind of more established DCNs who primarily only allowed those who had the RDN credential and years of practice to already enter. So really, it is an extension of the current DCN programs. Also on this committee, so there were the DCN program directors, there were faculty from this institution. Myself and another member were also part of the ACEND board of directors to be able to speak again about, the ACEND side of things. And then there were also graduates of the DCN programs. And so we had individuals from the existing DCN. It was primarily those individuals who served on the committee to help develop these standards. As we were developing these standards, ACEND wanted to be mindful that to be able to create something where individuals can get a practice doctorate, but it didn't have to necessarily be a clinical niche, if you will. These current programs tend to go in that direction, but even with the existing programs, some focused on clinical, some focused on leadership. And so there was always a different emphasis that they took based on the strengths of their faculty and the resources that they had at their institution. So with the current standard that was approved by the ACEND board recently and will be available for voluntary adoption later this year, I believe in June, it really is, it's the advanced practice doctoral education in nutrition and dietetics, in which within the standards, it is strongly recommended that the degree designator be the DCN, or the doctorate in clinical nutrition, so that the profession doesn't lose the traction and the recognition and the credibility that they've gained with that degree designator thus far. But really, it's always up to an institution as far as what they're going to call the degree. And a big distinction here that we can dig in more if you'd like, but this is a degree, not a credential. So the RDN is a credential that is, for lack of a better word, managed by the Commission on Dietetic on Registration. But the degree is always going to be up to the institution. And since it is a degree, that's not something that is required by the profession. So these are advanced practice doctoral standards that are optional. And what the standards do is provide some sort of structure for universities who want to implement them, so that we also know that we're graduating a consistent practitioner into the workforce that, to reduce confusion, but most importantly, protect the public.
Yeah, no, there's so many, just places that we could just extract the things that you said. And so the first thing, laying it out, just for people if they are kind of unfamiliar with the difference, what is the difference between CDR and ACEND and what they do?
So yeah, and I'll even throw the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics into the mix. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is the professional membership that is voluntary for individuals in the nutrition and dietetic profession to be a member of. It is, an important professional membership because they advocate for our services, they provide support in a variety of different ways. But really, there are two different branches from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. One of them is ACEND, the Accreditation Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics, and the other is CDR, the Commission on Dietetic Registration. What's important there is that they have to have autonomy from each other. What that means is that the Academy cannot influence what ACEND decisions are and vice versa. And the same thing with CDR. They have to practice autonomously. So while it's important for these groups to communicate, there can't be these external influencers on the decisions that are made. So the Commission on Dietetic Registration oversees the credential to practice. So they oversee the RDN and the NDTR. They set the requirements of what is necessary to practice. They set the requirements for the degree that is going to be required for practice. And so it was the Commission on Dietetic Registration that increased the eligibility requirement to a master's degree. And ACEND, even though we have to, I say we because that's who I volunteered for, but again, it's a volunteer position. In order to meet that requirement to sit for the credentialing exam, ACEND had to modify their standards so that students could be successful in that. And that's why, as of January 1 this year, programs have to have a pathway to ensure that students will be able to earn a graduate degree upon completion of their supervised practice rotation. And so ACEND accredits nutrition programs, CDR credentials individuals, and the Academy profession supports everybody within the nutrition and dietetics profession.
Yes, thank you so much for doing that clarification, because even for me, like, I'm very familiar with all those terms, but having it very cohesive where it's like this does this, this does that, and also the emphasis on autonomy. Like, for example, even though ACEND had to respond to CDR's new master's degree requirement, it wasn't, again, like with what you said, they worked autonomously. They had their own separate respective duties and responsibilities, where CDR changed the master's degree requirement for individuals, but then ACEND focuses on, okay, well, the graduate programs, like the layout of the new, like, future education models, now graduate programs, things like that, so that we can be up to snuff with the new standards, the new scope, things like that. And then again, where the Academy falls into that as well. So I really do appreciate you giving that distinction, because as you know, a lot of people, they just see all the Academy accreditation, they just see all these words jumbled, and then it gets a little like lost in the sauce, lost in translation, just with all things going on. But yeah, I really appreciate that distinction. And so whenever it comes to the new doctoral standards and, your research, and you had all these great things going on in FNCE 2023, you were able to do a panel discussion on these new standards that will be coming out in June. And so as far as the main takeaways of that discussion, maybe if it's like some, discussion points or things that you mentioned that you maybe haven't mentioned yet in this recording, or kind of things that you wanted the audience to take away at FNCE, because we mentioned beforehand where there's already people who have their opinions about needing the master's degree and about, the barriers already within the dietetics profession, finances, getting paid more. I'm sure like a lot of people in that audience came in with a preconceived notion of, oh, we just got the master's degree, why do I need to worry about a doctoral program now? Mm-hmm. And so whenever it came to that panel discussion, were there some key takeaways or just things that you mentioned that you really wanted to get the word out about these new advanced practice doctoral standards?
Sure. And so the purpose of that panel at FNCE, we were in the third phase of our Delphi process, which means we were still seeking public comment for how to modify these standards. So nothing was developed at that point. There had been a lot of different surveys and focus groups prior to that. So this was really to say, this is what we've developed so far. What are your thoughts? And what suggested modifications do you have for it? As you mentioned, a lot of folks came in with just some misunderstandings, thinking, now the profession's requiring a doctorate? What are we doing to ourselves? And it's not that at all. This is to provide a structured approach for those who want to pursue an advanced practice doctorate. And I use the word advanced because that is a key distinction. It is for individuals who have already been practicing for a couple of years. It really is important to the learning to bring in your past experiences so that you can build upon them. Nothing can replace experience in any profession that you're working. So this is an advanced practice doctorate that we were really seeking information about how we might be able to modify things. And we did go back and we learned some of the concerns about, what are the eligibility requirements for individuals to enter the profession or to enter these programs. The part that I'm trying to think of what part I spoke on as well, but really, the standards have 8 standards, just like they do for the didactic programs in dietetic internship. The part that it really came down to was the standard on curriculum and what we were planning to put in there so that, again, we produce a consistent graduate into the profession. And so it was good to get feedback about that. I think it was an opportunity for us to really clarify some of those misperceptions that people had. Stating that the DCN is a credential. It is not a credential. It is a degree. Credentials are necessary to practice, and so this is not necessary to practice. It was also an opportunity to share how much work has gone into developing these standards. ACEND hired a consultant that really helped with the validation process, and that can be complex too. So I think maybe while sharing some of that, it kind of got a little lost for people to follow as far as what work was done to get to where we're at. And so, some of the key messages that we were trying to share may have gotten lost because we could have communicated a little bit more effectively. But I think, interestingly for me, at the end, there were some folks who were, wanting to ask questions after the session. And they were individuals like yourself, Jenna. They were already, they're students, they're in newly credentialed dietitians, and they're like, I'm interested in get a doctorate. What can you tell me more about it? So they weren't even, in my experience with the people who asked questions afterwards, weren't really asking about the development of the standard. But I did see, people had excitement, interest in pursuing an advanced degree. And we're just really seeking information to learn how to do that. And I think that's exactly what these standards are going to do. If you have an institution that decided to voluntarily become accredited by ACEND, then it's going to be more clear to the public, more clear to those aspiring applicants, potential students about what this means and what they're going to learn while they're in the programs and what they may be able to do as a graduate of the program.
Yeah, and I think it's great how, again, it is important, even because I think it's not necessarily because you guys didn't communicate it effectively or, they were just purely not paying attention to the panel discussion. It's just very much like this is new for everyone. And so it was more so like not only processing all the new information, but you guys were also still with the training wheels on for developing the new doctoral standards and things like that. And so, but again, it was important to get that feedback early so that you can just see what the public is saying and seeing how things could develop for the guidelines, just what would be standardized and things like that. And one question that I had was whenever it comes to, like with what you mentioned, the allied health professions that also, require doctoral programs, or some that don't require a doctoral program, but a lot of people do get one anyways. A lot of those programs are heavily recognized. And I feel like within dietetics, we're not, even just with the credential, like removing degrees, I feel like even with the credential, we are not a very recognized profession anyways. And so whenever it comes to the doctoral standards, are there goals for emphasizing that more to other allied health professions or uplifting the voice of the DCN or like the new advanced practice doctoral standards and things like that? Are there motions or goals in the future to educate other allied health professions on the new standards or to make it more recognized in the healthcare space? Because I feel like one potential barrier that someone may see with pursuing this advanced practice doctorate is, okay, well, I'll get this degree, I'll get this, new title at the end of my name, but I'll still be treated the same in my hospital, or like I'll still be treated the same wherever I go. And so are there goals or certain curriculum implemented in the program to kind of help mitigate those concerns and help, make our place more prevalent with that doctoral degree? So
yeah, great questions. My mind went to a couple different answers. Let's see if I can tie it all together. I think, yes, there's absolutely an opportunity for that. And I think it's really important that that is done. That's a good example of showing, again, where the ACEND and the Academy and CDR all work together and have our different kind of responsibilities. So promoting the profession is the responsibility of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And so from what I understand, there are things in motion to certainly help elevate that for our profession. As you mentioned, even as the RDN, getting some recognition, and then certainly with this advanced degree as well. But within the curriculum, so there's really 5 key units within the curriculum, and it is advanced nutrition and related sciences, right? That's the core of what we do, so that needs to be there. But also in research, critical inquiry, research, and scholarship. But the ones that I think that are going to be unique as well to help the individual DCN graduate or advanced practice doctoral, again, the degree designator can be decided upon the university. But for simplicity, I'm going to keep saying the DCN for right now. But leadership. And so there's going to be curriculum on leadership, advocacy, and education. And I think the advocacy one I want to point out because we did get a lot of public comment back saying we don't really need this in our profession. But I think for those of us sitting around the table, it was evidence that their answer to saying we don't need it was even more evidence that we do need it. I think individuals think of advocacy as public policy. I'm speaking to legislators, and that's not an area of interest of mine. But advocacy expands way beyond that. It's about advocating for yourself. It's about advocating for your services. It's about advocating for your profession. And so, and I saw you make the money sign. Absolutely. That's what's going to make a difference. When you can articulate, quantify, demonstrate your value and the impact that you have at wherever your place of work is and your return on investment, that's when you'll get paid more. I know this I'm just talking about the doctoral standards. You know, when I asked individuals in my research, are you getting this to get paid more? They said, well, that'd be nice, but I don't expect that. So they weren't going in it for that. Some of them were going into it for advancing their scope of practice. Like one individual was engaged in research a ton within her critical care unit, but she could never be the primary investigator because she needed to have a doctorate. She's like, I was doing all the work, but you know, I had to have an MD or PhD champion sign on it, and I wasn't getting recognized for the work I was doing. And so, you know, I think it will get there as well. Again, I'm trying to think as I keep talking, you know, what was the first question that you kind of asked regarding this? But I think as I circle back, things within our curriculum that will help to identify the DCN. I think, again, there are intentional things with regard to leadership as well, where it's going to be these graduates and their voice is going to be really important for kind of paving the way for what individuals with this advanced degree are going to be able to do.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no, but you're going to say something else as well.
Yeah. The one interesting thing, you know, at the beginning of my interviews that I had with my participants, I said, how did you hear about the DCN? And shockingly, not a lot of people knew about the DCN before they ended up in the DCN program. About 40% just did an internet search and they're like, doctor in nutrition, advanced nutrition courses. And, you know, it was kind of whatever algorithm popped up some of these DCN programs. Some were interested in pursuing their PhD, but there are not a lot of PhD programs out there that are as flexible as the DCN, meaning that you can take it part-time, that it can be online. But the other majority heard about the DCN through word of mouth. And so as more and more individuals are in the profession with this advanced degree designator, becoming more recognizable, some had said that they saw those letters after somebody's name and Googled that as well. So even amongst those students who are in these programs, they didn't necessarily know the DCN prior to that. They were just seeking out additional learning opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that as well, where it's like even people in the program, how they found it out. That's such a great question to ask, because then it's like, okay, do we need to improve how people get into the program? Do we need to change how people are finding, you know, change how people find out about the program? And just really, really great important things to mention, especially about that doctoral degree. You definitely did answer the question as to, okay, how are we going to uplift? How are we going to make the doctoral degree worth it? Whether it's with the DCN, you know, the DCN or whatever degree that they name the advanced practice, whatever program names it however they wish, where it's like, yes, advocacy and being a leader. And with that doctorate degree, you do get, I and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming with a doctorate degree in any setting, you get enhanced scope or you get enhanced understanding, and you're able to do more with that degree. And in that curriculum, it sounds like you're teaching these students how to do more and how to advocate for themselves more and how to lead more with that doctoral degree, because it's not just, oh, I'm going to add 3 letters to the end of my name. It's so much more than that. And
Yeah.
it's the opportunities and taking advantage of that opportunity. And so to kind of tailor the last portion of this recording to is, if anyone's listening and they're like, a doctorate is something that, I mean, honestly, this is just me pretty much. A doctorate, something that's on the table, something that, I'm interested in, but I kind of, have some questions, or it's like just clarifying things, especially with everything changing within dietetics right now. Like, I just need a master's degree. D&D match went away. There's just so many things going on. And so first thing would be, outside of teaching in academia, and I'm sure this was mentioned within like the advanced practice standards, where would a doctorate be important regarding dietetics outside of those niches?
Right. And so, like what I found, and I think I previously mentioned, is a lot of these individuals, they love the area that they're currently practicing in. While majority were clinical, in others it was private practice or industry or whatnot. And they wanted to be able to teach the future. And so there's that education component that the standards has that's going to teach these graduates how to teach. And I think that's important as well. Oh my gosh, as I say that, I'm trying, Jenna, repeat your question again so I can make sure I'm not deviating too much.
Yeah, no, you're so fine. So yeah, that main question was just like, where would doctoral degrees be important in dietetics outside of academia and teaching?
Yeah. And so I think that's what I was kind of getting to, is like whatever area that they're working in, they may be able to go back and, give back to the future of our profession. That's important because there's a projected, 7% career growth in our profession. But we're going to need more individuals with doctoral degrees to be eligible to teach at that level. A lot of the folks that I interviewed honestly didn't know what they wanted to do next with it, but they were really excited to just see what opportunities took place. I'm thinking, we have seen a lot go into academia, but it may not be in your traditional professor role, but kind of more in an administrative role where you're serving as a program director for these graduate program types, formerly known as the future education model, or you're serving as internship directors. I've even seen in my research, just looking in higher education, looking for faculty positions, the DCN is listed as a recognized degree to be eligible to apply for faculty positions, which I think is very telling about what opportunities are there. But as I mentioned, that individual who's working in research couldn't be the PI, now they can be the PI. Somebody else was saying that they wanted to be able to do more, was clinical nutrition director of a system, wanted to go bigger with that, to learn the skills necessary to be able to do more, especially with the focus on, there is a research component still in this DCN. In some of my communications, when I asked folks what motivated them to get the DCN, some of them said, well, I wanted to do practice and I know a PhD was all research. They both have research. The difference is the type of research. PhD is theoretical, answering a question, where, and I might get this term wrong, but in the practice doctorate is more like application, outcome-based, translational research. So it might be doing something more like, randomized controlled trials about what formula might be better for somebody in a critical care unit. It might be about these really extensive quality improvement projects that, again, demonstrate the value that the dietitian team at whatever industry that you're in is able to bring back to the organization. So these individuals, these graduates, are learning the skills to equip them to be able to elevate the profession. And so I think these are the trailblazers who are going to help inform and see. And that was a follow-up to my research. I think the next step is getting, hearing the voice of these graduates and learning, what did you do with the degree? We had some phenomenal individuals, graduates who served on the Expanded Standards Committee. It was really interesting. Some of them work in education, some continue to work in private practice, now doing some more research in the type of work that they do, again, to help just contribute to that literature, inform not only our profession and things that you can do, but those outside our profession and the impact that we can have. And so I think it's right now, I think employers and others are learning about the advanced practice doctorate. They know about it in other professions, which primarily is in practice. When you think about OT or PT or pharmacy. But dietitians have always had more than one lane. We typically think of those lanes. It's not only these 3 lanes, but clinical, food service, and community. But there's so much other space that we are in, and with regard to how we can impact the public. I think, again, when individuals learn how to advocate for themselves and the new skills that they have, that will continue to elevate and inform the public and employers about what this degree designator is capable of doing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And especially, I'm glad that you mentioned the research component and how even though it's not a a doctorate in philosophy, you're still doing that research because even in practice, whether you're a dietitian in a clinical food service or community setting, you are doing research every day. And in that, doctorate in clinical nutrition, you're doing research that can also in turn advocate and be like, hey, look at how important we can be in this setting. Look, we identified a 15% food waste. And so now we're saving money. Or, hey, we found a more efficient formula. So we can stop purchasing this batch, save money, and direct it more towards efficient means. And so it's again, there are ways in which doctoral students, and especially in that new advanced practice or in the DCN right now, there are ways that they can uplift and again advocate for themselves in the profession. And I am just so happy to hear that that's part of the curriculum and that you emphasized advocacy is more than just policy. That is an important component, of course, but it's good to encompass all of advocacy because that's the only way that you'll be able to have an MD look at the DCN and be like, they're part of my team, they're the expert in their field. I'm going to, I will treat them as my equal and not as someone below me and things like that, which I think is very important. And as far as, because you mentioned right now that most of the DCNs, if not the 3 that you interviewed, they're mainly online part-time. And so with the new advanced doctoral standards with ACEND, did they keep it open-ended for whatever the university, if they wish to implement it, to have it online or in person? Was that kind of flexible up to their discretion?
Absolutely. And so with the ACEND standards and many other type of academic standards that are out there, they are the minimal requirements. And so a program, you have to allow a certain amount of flexibility as well so that the program can use what resources it has available to meet those minimum requirements, but also not limit, creativity and again, the strength that program's able to bring. And so I don't recall, particularly within the standards, if it talks about curriculum length. Each program needs to go ahead and create an objective around program length. And that's similar to it is right now in DPDs and in dietetic internships and other program types. And so while the programs have to identify an objective, it is up to the program to determine their length, their mode of teaching, as well as, they have flexibility in how they're going to meet the standard. They just need to be able to demonstrate that to ACEND.
No, yeah, for sure. And yeah, and it's important to, with what you said, you don't want to send just writing everyone's programs and then just being like, here, do that everywhere now. It's definitely important because different universities have different demographics. They have different types of students and, they have to tailor to, based off of that location, all those other factors, what's best for those students in that area for sure. And so I have one short question, and then the last question that I have is mainly about D&D match and just kind of clarifying some things about that. But so the second to last question is mainly just about timing. With what you said, a lot of those students, they worked for a couple of years and then they went back and got their doctorate. And so how important do you think is timing whenever it comes to pursuing your doctorate, or what considerations? Because again, everyone's timeline's different. You had some people who went back after not even 2 years of being in school. Some not waited, but some didn't go back until 30 years after. And so whenever it comes to timing, what considerations do you think students should have in mind that are interested in getting a doctorate?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, nothing can replace lived experiences. And I think, this was just true for myself that I can speak on, but it enriched my learning experiences more in my PhD courses, just because I can draw on these past experiences, continue to reflect. What I will say is within the doctoral standards that are proposed, it is a master's degree. You have to have the RDN credential and a master's degree and at least 2 years of experience. Or there's a pathway for bachelor's where you can earn your master's and your doctorate all in one time. And for those individuals, would be a bachelor's with at least 4 years of experience before going in. Again, we felt the experience was important. And in our discussions, we actually had it longer. Current programs are longer right now. You must have at least 5 years of experience. But what we're seeing is that graduates such as yourself, those entering professions, are eager to learn more, are eager to advance our profession. And we didn't want to limit them by having this requirement be longer and then have them get disinterested and pursue another career path. And so I would say, though, that just in my own, I think it's really important. Even you learn so much in your first year as a credentialed practitioner that I think that's really going to be a value add before you start a doctoral program.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you emphasize that, because I definitely saw myself being in that boat where I'm like, I'm gonna just go straight through. I'm gonna just, like kind of, again, super eager to learn as much as possible. But having people who have, because you've not only gone through the experience of a doctorate degree, but you've also been on the ACEND board where they've thought about, the prereqs to be getting into those programs, and experience, real world lived experience with that credential is super important and crucial. And I've heard that from more than just one RD with a doctoral degree, where it's like, it's good to have that reminder of real world experience. Application is important, and that'll enrich and also save money as well. Like, there's just a lot of benefits too with that, where it's like, it kind of eliminates that barrier. And so the last question, and this is just mainly a clarification question and kind of just looking ahead, is D&D matches going away, and can you distinguish, similar to what we did with CDR, ACEND, and the Academy, what is the difference between D&D match and DICUS, and just kind of that open-ended looking towards the future in that regards?
So DICUS is it's the application portal that many of those in our profession are used to doing. It's a centralized application system. That's what the CAS stands for, CAS. And many other professions use a CAS. There's GradCAS for graduate school. There's OptumCAS for optometry. There's PTCAS. So like, it's a standardized application platform that many health professions are familiar with. And our profession has been using that application platform for years. But not every program required to use DICUS. Some had their own application process, especially if they're part of a university system. And so DICUS is the application platform. It's where students will go in and say, here's my academic information, my background, my experiences that I have. And then there's usually a section 4 that's unique to the program, and where they talk about personal statement, letters of recommendation, and such. That's DICUS. D&D Digital was always separate, and that our last match was April 7th of this year. So we will not be utilizing D&D Digital services in the future. It was a process that is no longer effective in today's environment. So what do I mean by that? Years ago, the primary pathway for becoming a dietitian was to enter a dietetic internship. That was pretty much your choice for supervised practice program. And it was quite competitive and difficult to learn who was going to go where. So they used D&D Digital, which was this computer algorithm that helped with the applicant ranking where they want to go, where the program ranking, and on the back end, there was a match. It was always kind of this unspoken rule that where you were matched to is where you would end up going. Over the past several years, with new program types, graduate programs, future education model programs that didn't require you to use the match became more and more common. So we found people not adhering to the match. We found people who would get matched and then with, basically say thanks, but no thanks, and go somewhere else. And it became a very disorganized means. It caused a lot of frustration on both ends of things. And so it just didn't work in today's environment anymore. And what the ACEND Dietetics Application Task Force has proposed, and will be in pilot for this first year, is for to apply via DICUS. It's a one-stop shop for students to apply, one-time uploading references, transcripts. Hopefully it will reduce costs in the long run. And then there's a set date where every program needs to let the applicant know you were accepted, rejected, or waitlisted. And then they have 2 weeks to know all of their options and go, what is best for me? What's going to meet my needs? What financially? Can I move there? They don't have to worry about, I need to let this program know by March 1st, and match isn't until April 7th, and it's too risky, so I'm going to take this program, even though maybe I wanted this program. So the new process is student-centered. It's to support the student in making an informed decision about where they would like to continue their education.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that we're ending on mentioning, and it's the same thing with the doctoral standards. Students are first, and all of
Hmm.
these things, just end of the day, students are first. And it's not, again, like ACEND and CDR, they're not increasing these requirements to try and take more of your money. They're not trying to, they're not trying to make you go through more school before you can actually do what you want to do. These are all things put in place so that we can have a better voice in the profession, more pay, more recognition, and it's all being put in the direction of where dietitians and where nutrition professionals should be placed in the healthcare space. And again, thank you so much for sharing. We talked about a lot, just sharing your experience with your doctoral program, your experience with ACEND, the differences between ACEND, CDR, the academy, what it's going to look like in the future for those interested in a doctorate, and then also just the changes that are happening in dietetics. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Bacon, for sharing everything and just your expertise.
Yeah, thank you again for giving me the opportunity. And, I think the most rewarding part for me is hearing you summarize it accurately, which means that, the more, communicate early, communicate often. There's a lot of misunderstandings about the opportunities in our profession. So thank you for, putting a space for people to kind of clear up and to get the answers that they're needing. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck as you continue on your path.
Oh, thank you so much. But yeah, thank you. I really, really do appreciate it. But again, just a lot of great stuff, and people will definitely learn a lot.